To Vasily Kasherin only his mother came. His father, who was a wealthy tradesman, did not want to come. Vasily met the old woman as he was pacing up and down the room, trembling with cold, although it was warm, even hot, and the conversation was brief, painful. It wasn't worth coming, mother. You only torture yourself and me. Why did you do it, Vasya? Why did you do it? Oh, Lord! The old woman burst out weeping, wiping her face with the ends of her black woolen kerchief. And, with the habit which he and his brother had always had of crying at their mother, who did not understand anything, he stopped and shuddered as with cold, spoke angrily. There, you see, I knew it. You understand nothing, mother, nothing. Well, all right. Do you feel cold? Cold? Vasily answered bluntly, and again began to pace the room, looking at his mother askance, as if annoyed. Perhaps you've caught cold? Oh, mother, what is a cold when... And he waved his hand helplessly. The old woman was about to say, and your father ordered wheat cakes beginning with Monday, but she was frightened, and said, I told him, it is your son, you should go. Give him your blessing. No, the old beast persisted. Let him go to the devil. What sort of father has he been to me? He has been a scoundrel all his life, and remains a scoundrel. Vastyenka, do you speak of your father like this? Said the old woman reproachfully, straightening herself. About my father? About your own father? He is no father to me. It was strange and absurd. Before him was the thought of death, while here something small, empty, and trivial arose, and his words cracked like the shells of a nut underfoot. And, almost crying with sorrow because of the internal misunderstanding which all his life long had stood like a wall between him and those nearest to him, and which even now, in the last hour before death, peered at him stupidly and strangely through the small, widely opened eyes, Vasily exclaimed, Don't you understand that I am about to be hanged soon? Hanged! Do you understand it? Hanged! You shouldn't have harmed anybody, and nobody would, cried the old woman. My God, what is this? Even beasts do not act like this. Am I not your son? He began to cry, and seated himself in a corner. The old woman also burst out crying in her corner, powerless even for an instant to blend in a feeling of love and to offset by it the horror of impending death. They wept their cold tears of loneliness, which did not warm their hearts. The mother said, You ask whether I am a mother to you. You reproach me, and I have grown completely gray during these days. I have become an old woman, and yet you say, you reproach me. Well, mother, it is right. It is all right. Forgive me. It is time for you to go. Kiss my brothers for me. Am I not your mother? Do I not feel sorry? At last she went away. She wept bitterly, wiping her face with the edges of her kerchief, and she did not see the road. And the farther she got from the prison, the more bitterly she wept. She retraced her steps to the prison, and then she strangely lost her way in the city in which she had been born, in which she lived to her old age. She strolled into a deserted little garden with a few old gnarled trees, and seated herself upon a wet bench from which the snow had melted. And suddenly she understood. He was to be hanged upon the morrow. The old woman jumped up, about to run, but suddenly her head began to swim terribly, and she fell to the ground. The icy path was wet and slippery, and she could not rise. She turned about, lifted herself on her elbows, and knelt, and then fell back on her side. The black kerchief had slipped down, bearing upon the back of her head a bald spot amid her muddy gray hair. And then somehow it seemed to her that she was feasting at a wedding, that her son was getting married, and she had been drinking wine and had become intoxicated. I can't! My God, I can't! She cried, as though declining something. Swaying her head, she crawled over the wet, frozen crust, and all the time it seemed to her that they were pouring out more wine for her, more wine. And her heart had already begun to pain her from her intoxicated laughter, and from the rejoicing, from the wild dancing. And they kept on pouring more wine for her, pouring more wine. End of chapter 5.